They thought she was just another quiet kid with a check and no power. They didn't ask who she was, and that was their first mistake. Behind the glass walls of a luxury bank, a single act of arrogance lit the fuse. Now the system that tried to ignore her is about to feel what it means to be exposed. The wind was sharp that morning, tugging at the hem of Michaela's school blazer as she crossed the avenue. She clutched her folder tightly, the corner of a neatly folded check peeking through the edge. $5,000, her first scholarship award. Not just a piece of paper, it was proof of work, of effort, of belonging. She had rehearsed everything, what to say, how to hand over the check, where to sign. The bank she was heading to wasn't just any bank. It was Granholm Private, one of those glossy marble fortresses downtown where the windows sparkled like they didn't want to be touched, and the people inside looked like they breathed rarer air. Michaela pushed through the heavy glass door. A sensor dinged politely. The inside was all gold trim, cream walls, and air that smelled faintly of citrus and power. She stepped onto the polished floor like she was entering a courtroom, her back straight, shoes quiet but firm. The receptionist barely looked up from her tablet. A security guard by the front stared for a moment longer, then looked away. Michaela approached the front desk. "Excuse me, I'd like to deposit a check into my account," she said. Her voice was soft, steady, precise, like she practiced it in the mirror. She held out her ID and the check. The woman at the desk blinked slowly. "Do you have an appointment?" she asked flatly. "No," Michaela replied, holding eye contact. "I was told I could walk in. It's just a deposit." The receptionist sighed, took the papers, and typed slowly into her computer. A long pause. "What account number did you say again?" she asked, now glancing suspiciously at Michaela's school logo. "I didn't, but it's under Michaela Blair. My mother helped me open it last year." Another pause. The woman stared at the screen, then glanced at the girl, then at the check again. "Please wait over there," she said curtly, gesturing to a corner with a single plastic chair tucked beside a tall, decorative plant. Michaela sat down slowly, adjusting her backpack on her lap. The folder rested on top, closed but warm from her hands. Around her, men in suits talked quietly. A woman in heels walked past without glancing at her. A banker in a vest offered bottled water to an older couple across the room, but no one even looked her way. She checked the time. 10:12 a.m. From where she sat, Michaela could see into one of the glass-walled conference rooms. Inside stood a woman in red, tall, poised, arms crossed, a manager probably. She was speaking to a man in a long camel coat, his face hidden by a baseball cap pulled low. Something passed between them. A document, a folder. The woman glanced over her shoulder before slipping it into his hands. Michaela's brows knit slightly. She shifted forward, trying to read the label on the folder. Confidential. Emergent Holdings. Her pulse ticked up. Emergent was a rival firm to her mother's. She recognized the name, had heard it in whispered phone calls at home. Her eyes darted to her folder, then back to the pair. The man in the coat looked up. Their eyes met, just for a second. Then he turned, fast, and left through the side door. Michaela opened her notebook. She scribbled down everything. Time, name on the folder, woman in red, man in coat, label, left exit. Then quietly pulled out her phone and snapped a quick photo through the glass, catching the manager just as she turned back toward the hallway. From behind, a voice broke the moment. "Miss, you're not allowed to photograph inside the bank." It was the security guard, firm but not angry. Yet. "I wasn't," she said calmly, already locking her screen. "I was just checking the time." He watched her for a moment, then walked away. Another 10 minutes passed, then 15. Michaela stood and approached the desk again. "Excuse me," she said. "Has someone looked into my deposit?" The receptionist glanced up, annoyed. "Your information hasn't been verified. You'll need to wait. I've been here almost half an hour." "I'm sorry." the woman said, clearly not sorry. Please take a seat. Michaela looked around. No one else was waiting. 2 customers had entered, been helped, and left already. She wasn't being overlooked. She was being dismissed. She returned to her seat, her shoulders drawn but spine still straight. Her fingers found the edge of the check again. She wasn't going to cry. Not here. The door opened again. And this time, the sound of heels was louder, sharper, heavier, a familiar rhythm. Her mother stepped in, hair pulled back in a knot, wearing a tailored navy suit that meant business. Daniela Blair was not tall, but she carried presence like a shadow, cold, exact, powerful. The kind of woman who didn't need to raise her voice to rearrange a room. The security guard recognized her. Everyone did. A manager emerged almost immediately. Mrs. Blair, what an unexpected— My daughter has been waiting here for 30 minutes, Daniela said, with a legitimate check, a valid ID, and an active account. Of course, we'll look into it. She was ignored, questioned, moved out of sight, while questionable transactions occurred in view of your staff. There was a pause. Someone stepped back. Daniela turned her eyes toward the woman in red, now halfway down the hallway, frozen in place. And I believe we'll also be reviewing internal surveillance, she added, before this becomes a much broader issue. For your institution and for the regulators I'm already on the phone with. The entire room went silent. Michaela stood slowly and walked to her mother's side. For the first time since she entered the bank, someone offered her a chair. She didn't take it. Daniela didn't wait for permission. She walked through the main floor of Grand Home Private like she'd just stepped into her own boardroom. Michaela followed closely, her steps smaller but just as certain. The receptionist looked like she wanted to disappear into the marble. The manager in red, Sabrina, straightened her posture, but the tension in her fingers betrayed her. We'll take a private room, Daniela said, not as a suggestion. A glass door opened without argument. A junior associate rushed to pull chairs. Michaela took a seat this time because now she wasn't alone. Sabrina entered last, trying to control her breathing. She sat across from them with a practiced smile, one hand gripping a silver pen. This is all a misunderstanding, of course, she began. We treat every client with respect. Michaela tilted her head slightly. Daniela didn't blink. Tell me, Ms. Lowell, Daniela said coolly. Do you typically withhold service from minors who have valid documentation? It's not our standard practice. And yet my daughter was left waiting for 30 minutes, questioned without cause, and told nothing. In a branch where you knowingly handed confidential materials to a man affiliated with Emergent Holdings. The room dropped 10 degrees. Sabrina opened her mouth, closed it, tried again. That's an internal matter. Not anymore. Daniela took out her phone and pressed play. The screen showed a still image, grainy but clear enough. A gloved hand accepting a folder. Sabrina's face turned to the camera. The Emergent logo barely visible on the corner tab. You've met Larson Vest before, haven't you? Daniela asked. He's been photographed entering this bank twice in the past week. I assume you know he's under federal review for information laundering. Sabrina's throat moved, but no sound came. I'd advise you not to answer, came a voice from the door. A man entered, gray suit, no tie, smooth voice, corporate legal. Probably summoned as soon as Daniela walked in. He glanced at Michaela, then fixed his eyes on her mother. Mrs. Blair, perhaps we can step into a more suitable environment. There's no need to escalate. Daniela stood slowly. There's no need to pretend. You'll initiate an internal audit immediately. I'll be requesting access to the security footage for the last 72 hours, and Ms. Lowell here will be placed on administrative leave effective now. The lawyer tried to speak. She raised a hand. If you'd prefer this through litigation, I'm happy to oblige. But I don't think your board wants that headline. Outside the glass, bank staff pretended not to watch. Phones stopped ringing. Screens were refreshed without focus. Sabrina rose stiffly. She didn't look at Michaela, just gathered her things and left the room. Daniela turned to her daughter. Let's deposit your check. This time, no one questioned Michaela's ID. A new teller, nervous, kind-eyed, completed the process in under 3 minutes. Michaela signed the form with the same pen she'd been holding since morning. The funds went through. Her name lit up on the screen in green. Afterward, they exited into the sunlit street. Michaela exhaled fully for the first time all day. Daniela adjusted her sunglasses, scanning the traffic with quiet calculation. That folder, Michaela said. It said emergent on the tab. I know. He looked right at me. The man who took it. He probably didn't expect to be noticed. I wrote down the time, the code on the folder. I even got a photo. Daniela looked at her daughter. Really looked. Not like a worried mother, like a peer. You understood what you saw? I think so. You kept calm? Michaela nodded. Daniela's expression didn't soften, but something in her shoulders shifted. We'll discuss it tonight, she said. Not here. Michaela didn't ask why. She understood. The sidewalk might be just concrete, but the world was full of ears, and now she knew what it meant to be careful. Back at home, the house was silent. No TV, no music. Just the soft hum of security systems and the occasional click of heels across hardwood. Michaela sat at the kitchen island while her mother stood at the stove, not cooking, just thinking, arms crossed. Emergent has been circling our contracts for 6 months, Daniela said finally. Trying to get into education-based grants. They failed twice. But if they get access to our internal models, they can undercut the next round of bidding. Michaela's voice was even. Her mother turned, slightly, surprised. You really have been paying attention. I always pay attention. People just forget that when you're a kid. Daniela smiled, not wide, just enough to show she was listening now. They made a mistake, she said. They thought you were invisible. They weren't the first. Daniela poured tea, sliding a cup across the counter. Michaela accepted it like a peace offering. We'll let the board finish the internal review, her mother continued. But the cameras, the behavior, the data, Sabrina's done, and if Larson Vest so much as breathes near another folder, he's finished too. Michaela nodded. Are you scared? Daniela asked. No. Good. But remember, being brave doesn't mean you have to be alone. Michaela looked down at the cup. The steam curled in soft shapes. I wasn't alone, she said. Not anymore. By the following Monday, the story had legs. Someone inside the bank had leaked the security footage. First, it landed anonymously on a niche financial blog. Within hours, it was clipped, reposted, reshared across social platforms. Headlines followed. Teen denied service at private bank despite valid credentials. Then came the commentary. Threads exploded. Would this happen to a blonde girl in pearls? She spoke perfectly, carried ID. What more did they want? And quietly, between the outrage and the memes, one name kept surfacing. Daniela Blair. Not just a mother, not just a woman in heels, a name with weight. At 8 a.m., Grand Home Private's main office sent out a press release. We are conducting a full internal review. The employee in question has been placed on leave. We are committed to fair and equitable treatment for all clients. But it was too late. Public opinion wasn't waiting for the review. Michaela's name was already trending. At school, things were awkward. Half the students looked at her like she was famous. The other half didn't know what to say. A few offered quiet support, notes left in her locker, a smile in the hallway, but most just stared. You're the girl from the video, right? One boy asked in the cafeteria. Michaela didn't answer. She focused on her sandwich. You totally own that banker lady, someone else said. I wasn't trying to own anyone, she muttered. I just wanted to deposit a check. Back home, things were more focused. Daniela was already in touch with legal teams. Meetings had been scheduled with the bank's board. The SEC had opened a preliminary inquiry into emergent holdings. Nothing official, yet. That evening, Michaela sat on the couch, watching her mother pace in the kitchen, phone glued to her ear. "No, I don't want an apology letter. I want a written acknowledgement of the breach," Daniela snapped. "They compromised our models. We can't ignore that because it makes them uncomfortable." She ended the call and rubbed her temples. Michaela spoke quietly. "You think he'll show up again? The man in the coat?" Daniela looked at her. "If he does, it'll be through lawyers, not side doors." "Can we do something about the others?" Michaela asked. "Like, the way they treated me? It wasn't just one woman." Daniela sighed. "That's harder. It's built into the walls." Michaela turned to face her. "Then maybe the walls need repainting." Daniela raised an eyebrow. "That's more poetic than I expected." "You're not the only one who pays attention." The next morning, Michaela was invited, formally this time, to meet the CEO of Grandholm Private. A black car arrived at 10 a.m., all tinted windows and polished leather. Michaela didn't want to go alone. Daniela offered to join her. She refused. "I can do this," she said. The headquarters was even grander than the local branch. High ceilings, glass elevators, art that probably cost more than her education. Michaela was led to the top floor, where a woman in a gray suit with quiet eyes greeted her. "Ms. Blair," she said, "my name is Evelyn Marlowe. I'd like to start by saying, we failed you. That should never have happened." Michaela nodded, but didn't smile. Evelyn continued, "We've terminated the employee responsible. We're reviewing all training protocols. And we'd like to offer you—" "I'm not here for compensation," Michaela interrupted. The CEO blinked. "Then what are you here for?" "To ask what changes you'll make so the next girl doesn't need a viral video to be taken seriously." The room went still. "I want to see the training materials," Michaela said. "The real ones. Not the ones you show reporters. I want to know if anyone there is learning to see people who don't walk in with a Rolex and a trust fund." Evelyn leaned back. She studied the girl in front of her, barely 5 feet tall, hands folded in her lap, spine like steel. "We're launching a new initiative," she said, "an advisory council on equitable service. We'd like you to be the first youth voice on it." Michaela paused. "Do I get to approve ideas?" "You'll have a vote." "Then okay." That night, back at home, she told her mother everything. "You did what?" Daniela said, half proud, half startled. "They offered a seat. I took it." Daniela was quiet for a moment. Then, "You've always been ahead of the curve. I just don't want to be the story. I want to help rewrite the script." Later, in her room, Michaela opened her notebook. The one she'd used at the bank. She flipped past the notes from that day, past the sketch of the folder, past the quote she'd scribbled in frustration. "They don't see me." She wrote a new line underneath it. "They will, now." By the end of the week, Michaela's name had moved from hashtags to headlines, not as a scandal, but as a symbol. What started as a silent act of dismissal inside a private bank had turned into something much louder. Panel discussions, school assemblies, interviews on morning shows. The footage of her sitting patiently, gripping her folder, being ignored while others passed through effortlessly. It struck a nerve. The press called it the Grandholm moment, a viral image in 1,000 retweets. But for Michaela, it wasn't a moment. It was a mirror, and she was done watching it reflect the same story. She received a formal invitation to speak at the Midtown Youth Summit. Hosted by the city, sponsored by half the institutions that once overlooked girls like her. The email came with a line that made her blink. "We believe your voice can help shape a better culture of access and respect." It sounded rehearsed, but she accepted anyway. Daniela helped her prepare, but only when asked. She sensed this was a line Michaela needed to cross on her own. On the morning of the event, Michaela dressed herself in a deep navy blazer and clean white sneakers. She didn't wear anything fancy. She didn't have to. Her presence did the talking now. The auditorium was packed. Teachers, community leaders, board members. Lights shimmered above the stage like a courtroom ceiling. Michaela sat backstage listening to a keynote speaker talk about unlocking youth potential. She had to stop herself from rolling her eyes. When they called her name, the applause was polite, curious. A few phones lifted. She walked slowly to the podium. The mic was too high. She adjusted it herself, didn't wait for help. Then she looked out into the room and spoke. Most people think silence is safe, that if you don't challenge anything, nothing challenges you. But silence isn't safe when it lets others decide your worth. No preamble, no greetings, just truth. I walked into a bank to deposit a check. I was ignored, questioned, pushed aside. But that isn't what made me speak out. What made me speak out was realizing that I wasn't the first, and I wouldn't be the last. The room grew still. Teachers leaned forward. Parents stopped scrolling. I've spent a lot of time wondering what would have happened if I looked different. If I had a different last name. If I came in with someone older, someone paler, someone louder. But then I realized, it doesn't matter what if. It matters what now. She looked toward the side of the stage where Daniela stood in the wings. Arms folded, proud, still and silent. Now, we ask better questions. Now we change the way we train people to serve. Now we stop making power look like one specific kind of person. Applause broke out, first in ripples, then louder. Later that night, social media lit up again. Clips from her speech were shared by activists, bankers, even celebrities. One post read, "The future doesn't ask for permission anymore." Another simply said, "She didn't raise her voice." She raised the standard. At home, Michaela curled on the couch with her phone buzzing nonstop. She let it buzz, let the attention swirl outside the walls of her living room. Daniela walked in, holding 2 mugs of tea. She handed one to Michaela, sat down, then waited. "You didn't look nervous," she said eventually. "I was. I just didn't let it decide for me." They sat in quiet comfort. Mother and daughter, both fighters in different ways. "Do you think any of it will stick?" Michaela asked. "The policies, the promises?" "Some will, some won't," Daniela said. "But now they know someone's watching. That changes things." Michaela nodded. "Good. Because I don't plan to stop." She opened her laptop and began drafting an email. It was addressed to the bank's advisory board, suggesting new customer inclusion metrics and a mentorship program for first-gen teen account holders. Daniela watched, not interfering, just listening to the quiet sound of keys clicking. The next morning, Michaela received 3 responses, all positive. One offered a meeting, another asked if she'd help design the program herself. The third was from a national youth coalition. "We'd like you to be a speaker at our spring forum." When she walked into school that day, something had shifted. People didn't just recognize her, they approached her. A girl from sophomore year said, "I watched your speech with my mom. She cried." A boy from her math class asked, "How did you stay so calm?" "I wasn't," Michaela said, "but I knew what I needed to say." One teacher pulled her aside after homeroom. "Thank you," she whispered, "for saying what a lot of us were too afraid to." That afternoon, in civics class, their lesson was on youth-led change. The teacher asked, "What makes someone ready to lead?" Michaela didn't raise her hand. But the answer was already living in the room. A month later, the glass walls of Grandhome Private looked different. Not because of renovations, though they'd changed the lighting and removed the velvet ropes, but because people were watching now. Customers entered more slowly with curiosity, like stepping into a place that had been remade. Behind the counters, new faces appeared. Not polished mannequins in suits, but people who smiled first, people who listened before speaking. Michaela hadn't returned since her last meeting with the board, but today she had a reason. She entered quietly, no press, no cameras, just her and a folder in her hands, this time filled not with a check, but with a proposal, a real one. For a youth-led mentorship program across all Grandholm branches, designed to teach financial literacy, confidence, and accountability to teens, especially those from underrepresented communities. The idea was hers, the pitch was hers, and now the decision would be theirs. The branch manager who greeted her was new. His badge read T. Nguyen. He stood up as she approached. "You must be Michaela Blair," he said, offering a hand. "We've been expecting you." She shook it firmly. No nerves, no hesitation. "Thank you for meeting with me," she said. "I'll try not to take too much of your time." They moved to a side room, no longer a glass cage meant to isolate, but a warm space with books on the shelves and artwork on the walls. A small group waited, a regional coordinator, a diversity officer, and one of the VPs she remembered from the summit. She presented her idea clearly, walking them through each step: onboarding, community outreach, peer mentorship, measurable impact. No theatrics, just vision and data. When she finished, there was silence, and then the VP leaned forward. "This is better than anything we've put together internally. We'd like to pilot this," the coordinator added. "With your name on it." Michaela hesitated for a beat. "It's not about my name. It's about the next kid who walks in and thinks, 'I don't belong here.' I want that kid to leave thinking the opposite." They nodded. The proposal was approved before she even left the building. Outside, the air felt sharper, lighter. She paused on the steps of the bank, looking down the avenue where it had all begun. Same street, same buildings. But she felt taller now. That weekend, the city hosted a youth achievement gala, small, quiet, held in the rooftop garden of a downtown hotel. Michaela was invited, but didn't plan to speak, until the host asked her to say a few words. She stood before the microphone, unsure at first what to say. Then she spoke without notes. "People keep calling me brave, but bravery isn't loud. It's not a headline or a speech. Sometimes it's just staying in the room long enough to be seen." There were no cheers, just a long, thoughtful silence, the kind that meant people were actually listening. Afterward, as she walked through the crowd, someone tapped her shoulder. A girl, no older than 12, in a hoodie 2 sizes too big, holding a brochure for the mentorship program. "Are you the girl from the video?" the girl asked. Michaela smiled. "I'm the girl who stayed." The girl nodded, eyes wide. "I think I want to sign up." "You should," Michaela said. "And if anyone tries to tell you you don't belong somewhere, stay anyway." The girl grinned. "Okay." Later that night, back at home, Michaela opened her notebook again. The same one. Pages now filled with ideas, sketches, headlines, names, reminders. She flipped to the very first page, the one with the words she'd written that day in the bank. "They don't see me." She drew a line through it. Then underneath she wrote, "They do now, and more are coming." Downstairs, she heard her mother laughing softly on a call, the warm hum of life resuming. Outside, the city glowed in pieces, streetlights, windows, distant cars. She turned off the lamp, not because she was tired, but because she finally felt at peace in the dark. And in the quiet, she knew this wasn't the end. Just the beginning of something bigger, something worth staying for. Share your opinion about this story in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe and like so you don't miss new stories.